Howdy. And yes, probably you can easily accuse me of beating a dead horse regarding why I think Trump will probably have a third term. And so to investigate this, I've already made an entry, and so this is kind of like following it. And so before I get into it, we know about how I think the system is rigged. I mean, like we have the 2008 recession, which I do want to unpack on a separate occasion, and I mean, that alone, would have you know steered some people toward an alternative camp that is not mainstream. Like, so there's this anti-mainstream kind of a thing, and we want an outsider, and Trump played that role. But just looking at that, I wasn't satisfied. I feel that knowing a little about history, especially American history, there is more to it than that. That is still pretty much, you know, if it's not, it's a festering kind of a, big zit, with this pus in it. It's a festering thing, and I think that it has something to do with buzzwords like, oh, traditional American values and make America great again. And if anybody has a modicum of understanding of American history, you know, that points to, a bunch of, white Christians, basically white people, and it points to non-liberal thinking individuals. And this is the type of thing that ensured a Richard Nixon victory, and I have made comparisons between both presidents, Nixon and Trump, because I like to pull away from these I call them scapegoats, and look at the individuals, look at the individual population, us voters. And so to say that it's because of the economy, it's because of the 2008 recession, people today are going to still vote for Trump. When Biden presidency ended, he brought down the inflation rate, and it's a lot worse now than it was then. And yeah, when he was in the middle of his presidency, the inflation really skyrocketed. It was really horrible, and we kind of have a clue why. I mean, Biden had to repair the country when it was struck a deadly blow with the pandemic, and also with the war in Ukraine, with Russia invading Ukraine. And I think that with the controversy of COVID-19, that really muddied up the waters. But you have to understand who was president when that virus hit, and just to remember that Trump fired all of the immunologists that Obama put in place. Uh, it's just Trump handled the whole thing rather poorly, and so he created a scapegoat of, like, it was a lab leak. I mean, his followers did, and I think he did too, right? I just is off the top of my head. I'm not going to look into that. I'm not going to look it up right now because that's beside the point. And Anthony Fauci now is being, totally, slammed, and like totally grilled and drilled and, um, put into the fryer, and into the cooker. And I'm just saying, that I'm not like um, shy of thinking that it was a lab leak and all that, but and I know this sounds like a weak argument. Putting that aside, I totally get it. I totally understand that, and you know how I attack the system, so don't get me wrong. Um, you have to understand when you have somebody who's always pointing to somebody else, saying, look at that. They're the reason, you know. It's a very Nixon esque type of tactic. You're blaming the other guy. And so Donald Trump, whose name is on the Epstein file like umpteen times, and I mean, he's a fucking felon. And you know that, he has a thing for underage women. And I can't believe his wife is still with him. And so all this stuff, it's like the UFOs are out. Oh yeah, let's talk about these aliens, and let's talk about, man, we're being invaded by communism. Communism, it's communism. So it's like the aliens. Let's look at the aliens. Look over there, the aliens, and it's the communists. It's the communists. They want to put women in men's sports. Anthony Fauci, he's the culprit. He's the reason why your life sucks. Um, it's the immigrants, the illegals. They're the reason why everything sucks. So he's very much pointing to all these different scapegoats, and so that's the reason why. Although I understand some of the gray area with Fauci and that, um, I just don't bite because of the finger pointing and the misdirection, of your passion for, what you want to be done right, for justice and what have you. It's something that you really want to pay attention to. Look at the guy, listen to what he's saying, and he's using so he's using like a lot of the same tactics that Hitler did, because there was when Hitler was rising to power, there was all sorts of horrible situation going on in Europe, especially in Germany, and so the scapegoat was the Jews. And if everyone was, living happy lives, little happy German lives, and you know, food wasn't, the cost for food wasn't through the roof, and everything was just fine, and they weren't having to repair themselves from World War I debacle. Germany was really, hit hard, you know, because of that. Uh, I mean, you'd be like, who the heck is this, Hitler guy? It really wouldn't have, it wouldn't really have taken off. And it's a similar thing happening here. I've already looked into, and I want to explore that further, how, prices seem to be going up. I want to do something like comparing the 1970s to like right now. And I go back and forth, and, you know, uh, I just want to go with what, where my nose leads me. And as I make these videos, I want to go over them and see this pattern and see where it's going. And I've already made some live videos talking about um, this sort of like, structure that seems to be forming. Anyways, without further ado, I wanted to proceed. And so it's going to start out with my little conversation with ChatGPT, and I'm going to end it. Then I'm going to end it with an article that I wrote, and hopefully that'll be it for this topic of in question. Why certain people voted for Trump, and I'll probably get back into like the Trump win prediction because it's only August. So as the months press on, I want to revisit that subject. So right now, where are we? So I again, I'm just going to go out and just do this. So like in 2024, when Donald Trump had won, putting all this economic stuff aside, if there was no bigotry in the United States. Now I put myself in a real, minefield because it's going to be a complicated answer. It's not going to say, "Oh yeah, sure," but as you work with ChatGPT or any other AI program, you and I've done this before. It gives you layers of response. So, but as you press it and it digs deeper, it starts hitting it to where it's like, wow, you kind of contradicted yourself ultimately. But the devil in the detail stuff, you somehow were able to string yourself along. And um, so there are some reasons why the argument is like why he would win. And it says economic discontent. Now, the problem with that is I said get rid of the economic discontent, you know? And so it's funny how it did that. The working class shift. Um, you have like a lot of working class people, including some non-white voters, shifting towards the Republican Party because of the economic problems. And it's like, so these two replies, I find it as a buffer to the harsh reality that I will try to demonstrate as to why ultimately Trump is still winning. Okay. Voters around the world voted against the political party currently in power in 2024 due to post pandemic challenges. So you're blaming. So what's really weird is like Trump was president when that hit, and anybody who was forced to deal with it is bound to be attacked. And so Biden's a scapegoat. They used him as a scapegoat. I made a reason I'm throwing the word scapegoat around now is because I made two live um, you know videos live streams about scapegoats. And I talk about the French philosopher Rene Girard and stuff like that. I will definitely go back into that more uh, in the future. So again, so it's because of the pandemic and the economy is why they voted for Trump. Uh, you know, in 2024. Doesn't that seem weird to you at all? And for me it does. And and I know I looked into the whole like thing with the lab leak and all that, but like I mean Anthony Fauci was around since like Reagan was president, and so you had a bunch of Republican presidents and Democratic presidents ever since, and so they're all just you blame Biden. You see what I'm saying? You blame the Democrats. It doesn't. And believe me, I have a lot of bones to pick with the Democrats, and I have shown that. And but that's not what's going on today. What's going on today is Donald Trump was elected again, and he's still being supported by I think too many people, and that's why I'm doing this, and that's why I'm predicting that he'll win a third time somehow, some way. His ideas will live on in the White House, and or he will actually be in the Oval Office come 28. So the anti-incumbent trend. You always blame the person that's in office for all this stuff, and it's just I know. Uh, so But this is where it gets interesting. Arguments that Trump would have lost, would lose. Cultural polarization. I think it's like social issues and identity politics were major drivers for voter turnout and deep political division. And so when you think about that, um, it sort of points to like uh, the MAGA base. They want to have their identity is like this religio American type of identity and American values. And the fact that and of course that's going to be America first. um, and yet the fact that he I mean, we're like $40 trillion in debt, right? And it's because of this whole Iran debacle and all the stuff that he's doing abroad. It's not America first anymore. And and even if he verbally spins it off as such, how can anybody be so lame as to take that seriously? So it's this cultural problem. And a part of that is because America is such a narcissistic country. And so, and make no mistake, even with the left, it's like we're all a bunch of freaking narcissists, but it seems like the American Christians are the worst. I mean, some of them actually think that the world they're the center of the whole universe. Yeah, to this very day, there's people, okay, here it is. Like, and I've spoken with these people. There are people who believe that the earth is flat. And so that's the center of the whole universe. And you could trace bits and pieces of the Old Testament to show that, yeah, it's more like a flat earth than a this thing that's floating in nothingness, that like the way Carl Sagan would or Neil Tyson deGrasse would describe our world. And so they're at the center of everything. And if you know a little bit about history, Gaetano Bruno, he was murdered by the church for pretty much saying that those lights in the sky, those are other stars, and there's planets like ours. How did he know that? Back, that's a whole other thing right there. You know, it just blows my mind. And so there's people today, if they were in power, and like if they somehow were totally given carte blanche, maybe they would kill us liberals who think that the earth is round and you know our closest non-human ancestors are chimpanzees. Think about that. I wouldn't kill anybody for saying that they didn't believe in evolution. Would you? Like, if you're an atheist, it's like, I'm not going to die for the, evolution, But there's people who are religious that would kill in the name of their God. Okay. And that's why I insist that there's this underlying factor, this festering stench that has mobilized this Trump success, and that it will be another one for him in 2000, in 2028. So the mobilization of opponents. So you have rhetoric around social values strongly motivated a large coalition of voters to unite against the opposition. And so I think that against him, uh, that he would have lost, and so the opposition would be Trump. And so you have the different electoral map without cultural grievances shaping how people align with political parties. Traditional party loyalties and candidate favorability might have shifted significantly. Well, I mean, yeah, he wouldn't have won. you know, you have to understand. I'm reading this as it's saying it. And like I'm trying to demonstrate, like there's this like buffer that the AI is presenting that I'm trying to penetrate. And so what I mean is, so analysis of the 2024 election generally focuses on these things, and it always throws the economic factors. And I kept on insisting, forget the economic factor. We already know that that exists. I'm interested in the, psychological, the social and cultural ones, and so I'm skipping the economic ones. So other researchers emphasize in the social and cultural factors. They emphasize the role of cultural issues, voter mobilization strategies, and shifting demographic alignments among working class voters of various backgrounds. And again, you're gonna see how I press ChatGPT. It just sounds so vague, doesn't it? Um, I think the sleeping fox has one of its eyes open. So I'll just read this. Political science concepts. Scholars often use frameworks like cross-cutting cleavages to understand how economic self-interest, social identity, and regional trends intersect in American voting patterns. And so, doesn't it sound like a whole bunch of bullshit? It does to me. So this is where I'm trying to like really you know um, get my message across. So I'm saying, yeah, but these people still support Trump. And that's in spite of all the bad economical things, and I should have mentioned the war in Iran. He ain't putting America first. So what else is going on? I think it's bigotry. And make no mistake, I fucking hate ChatGPT. Because you got to understand, it's put there by billionaires, and somehow it's going to be used to control us more. You got to remember that, people. And I'm using it because I live in Rome, and I think that it's great to stare your enemy right in the face, and so and know how to dance with your enemy. It sounds kind of fucked up, doesn't it? But so I'll be well versed in AI and stuff like that because I interact with it, and so I kind of know the enemy. All right, so let's just say that. And also as far as AI, if we lived in a very compassionate world that has still had technology, we could use AI to make all our lives easier. You know what I'm saying? So it's almost like you're going to blame an inanimate object for all of your troubles, and that's something that you don't want to do. You know, considering AI like a non-living inanimate thing. Um, and I know some of you people who have guns probably, Second Amendment right, enthusiasts probably say, yeah, yeah, amen, brother. So, there is that. Culture. Okay, so political scientists and pollsters have spent a lot of time studying why voters support Trump. While some researchers agree that racial resentment and cultural anxiety play a major role, so it does. So some of these people, researchers, they see it as that's a major role, and that's what I'm saying. Others argue that different non-academic factors are driving this loyalty. So what does that mean? Let's break it down. So cultural anxiety and status loss. Many researchers argue that support for Trump is tied to a feeling that traditional American culture is changing too fast. So, I mean, okay, right there, if you know a little bit about American history, if you live in the United States, that just means that, wow, we're going to have more than two gender. There's more women having what, businessmen have. And Jesus God, Hillary Clinton, is running for president, and oh my God, another woman is running for president. Oh my God, that come on, man. And they both are for like, you know, transgender rights and all this other stuff. And so if you're not really paying attention, you could be really, you know, your arguments could be dismissed using this this online, you know, bot. Um, so the viewpoint analysts who agree with me, argue that this manifests as prejudice against immigrants, minorities, or changing social norms. They see this cultural defense as a primary driver of voter loyalty. So there it is, and also it's based on status. Like we boomers, we think that we're still like supposed to be top dog, and like the way we see things. And I don't know. I don't identify with a lot of the people of my age group, at all. And but those people who stick to that, they it's based on race and religion and nationality, and also America, like nationalism esque type of thing. And and so yeah, this like that's the theory, and the viewpoint is analysts will tend to agree with me that this manifests as prejudice against immigrants, minorities, or changing social norms. And you see how at first you weren't getting that from what ChatGPT was telling us, right? And now look where it's going because I'm pressing the issue. And so so this part talks about distrust for institutions and the outsider appeal, and yeah, and that was a big factor for why he won then. And again, remember, I'm talking about the second time he ran for president. And is that outsider appeal still going to stand firm? Um, well, he didn't attack Iran then, and he didn't invade Venezuela. So a lot has changed since 2024, right? And so I would have to do this again when he wins again. If he does, God, I hope he don't. So you have like the whole identity thing, and so what you have are um, things like unfortunately political parties becoming the core part of people's personal identity. Now think about this. You go and check out my two live streams about uh, mimetic uh, theory of desire. So the way that works is you have like people have to look to somebody else to tell them what they want. That's what this French philosopher was saying. And so uh, and we have that big time in this country now. It's like today everyone's like, they all want to have what like Zuckerberg has in terms of the money and everything and success and I've seen things when I used to be on Facebook, and like Mark Zuckerberg would pop some kind of a thing that we're gonna cook some, we're having a barbecue, and there's this beautiful view of something, like the beach or whatever, beachfront property. I don't know where he lives. And like all these people are like, "Oh, sir, I want to kiss your ass, sir. Give me a job, sir." And like all these people is loving this guy to death, and that's what I mean. It's like so that's completely what um, we're talking about here with the whole scapegoat thing. Um, is that like the object that's desired by the subject is mimicked in imitating like these recipients of a lot of money and success, and so like they just want to fall right in line with that. It's like, what else are you about? Like, what kind of culture do you have? Like, what kind of music do you like? What kind of books do you like? do you ever spend time out in nature? Are you just about like this office life and this thing about like making money, and it's just so weird, like, and being on Facebook, it's just, and like all these people in other parts of the world too, it's like, so this whole mimetic theory of desire thing, it falls onto all of our fucking laps. We're all like guilty of this in some size, shape, size, form or other. So let's get back to this. So I don't think it's good to identify as I'm a Republican, I'm a Democrat. I might vote Democrat because like one of the things is like, so one of the things that Clinton did was he put like this this law to protect a lot of our national forests. And I'm sorry, even though Monica Lewinsky sucked his dick, if he's going to preserve like millions of acres of national forest, I'm going to vote for the bloke. I'm sorry, man. Um, so you have negative partisanship. Often voters are not motivated by how much they love their own candidate. Instead, they are motivated by how much they dislike or fear the other party. So that's something that is very, very powerful. Again, that's like, oh, I'm gonna blame these other people, and so this is totally Rene Girard, because you're imitating. If you're a Trump supporter, you're imitating your model. Trump is the model that you're mimetic. This mimetic type of theories. It talks about you're imitating him to desire what he is calling for, instead of looking into your own self, looking into your own heart. Like, you're really stuck, man. You are really stuck. And it's like, oh, I hate, like, and I'll show you, because I'm gonna end this with an article that I wrote, and it just totally blows away any kind of uh, confusion as to why Trump is winning, apart from the economic shit. Okay, and so and probably this could work both ways. Like, probably when Trump was first running, all the Democrats had was, "Oh, we hate Trump. We don't want him to win." And so that caused like distrust for the people who are lukewarm, and they don't kind of they kind of like don't like how things are going because of the 2008 recession. And I don't think everybody who voted for Trump are like bigots. I don't think I say that, like, but what I'm saying is now, because there are people who don't like Trump anymore who voted for him. They're out. But now, if you're still voting for him, that's kind of like where I'm trying to, channel this or direct this. So the whole negative partisanship thing is bad, you know, and I was wanting to, get Bernie Sanders in there, you know, and so I can never forgive the Democratic Party, the DNC, for throwing him under the bus. But it doesn't mean that I'm not going to vote for a Democratic, candidate. I mentioned the whole thing about the forests. I mean, if the Republican, here's the thing: if the Democrats were like totally like, we're scaling down the acreage of our national forests, uh, and everybody is gay who's saying this. Yeah, we're gonna get rid of the national forests. We're gonna frack everything, and forget Bears Ears in Utah, and you know, and all that, and forget all the the national you know wilderness here in Arizona. Forget it all. We're gonna develop all of that. We're gonna privatize all that. I would vote Republican. What I'm saying? That's where I come from. You know what I'm saying? I'm a real nature lover, although I don't really live out in nature all the time. I think that like for America, the national forest is the best. That's what America is. You want to know what really America is? You look at all of that, and you go to Utah and stuff like that, or parts of Arizona and California, of course, and there's other parts of the country that, I remember when I was in Michigan, we used to go up, like here's the mitten, we go up, and like, wow, it's so beautiful. And I fell in love with it. And I think, well, that's, to me, that's what America is to me. And Donald Trump's is gonna he's getting he wants to sell, like he's talking about opening up to roads and stuff like that, and loggers and all that, up to like millions of acres. We're talking millions of acres of our national forests, and we're talking millions, people. So millions, plural. So I that alone for me is like, screw this guy. So you have okay, let's look at the tribal effect. Once a candidate becomes the leader of a person's team, that person will often defend the leader and overlook their flaws or bad economic outcomes just to beat the opposing team. That's the whole tribalistic thing. And that's exactly with Trump. They're doing that. Again, it's also because of the mimetic theory of desires, you know. Uh, Now we also have the information bubbles, like with alternative media. And so these create different realities. And you get into, like, if you're just watching, like, Fox, you're gonna be lied to about all sorts of shit. And again, so again, this is like, it's still very lukewarm, because those people in Fox, I mean, they're all white, man. I'll be the one to fucking say it, you know. Fuck Fox, man. Fuck them. So here, I started, like, I called Chappie a cuck, you cuck, and it's like, how could, like, people still be supporting this guy when he effed up our economy, okay? And so I'm not satisfied, so I'm pushing this, right? The role of prejudice against LGBTQ plus individuals, immigrants, and minority groups is a central part of how political scientists and data analysts explain support for Donald Trump. That's not what it now. Do I have to go back and redo this? Just rewind my video and see how ChatGPT was dealing with my questions into this matter, and where I've gotten the sleeping fox to go. So I think that it closed its second eye. So now it's sleeping all the way. Don't trust this stuff online. Don't trust ChatGPT. Use it like the way I'm using it. Use it, but like, I'm all for, like, feeling, feel the force, which is trust your better sense, man. Trust your gut, your better sense. And this is something that goes against probably, like, how liberals would think, how the neurological correlations of their thought processes are. But that's something that I can't explain. But, like, I feel like somehow, and I'm gonna brag a little bit, I feel like the way I think and feel about things, I somehow was able to preserve a nice part of my childhood. Because, the whole thing about, like, black babies playing with yellow babies, and white babies and red babies, that kind of a thing. Um, I'm one of those babies, man. Even if you're a black baby, you don't want to play with this, olive skin colored baby. Hey, that's your problem. You know what I mean? So I was able to somehow, like why, like people close to me. It's like, why are you talking like this? Like, what happened to you? We come from the same neighborhood, and it just, like, they lost a part of themselves that I somehow been able to retain. And I can say that with some pride. So, anyways, so yeah, it's the role of prejudice against LGBTQ individuals and immigrants and minority groups is a huge fucking factor in here, and that's what it says for the support of Donald Trump. Researchers track these social attitudes closely to understand voter behavior. And so, yeah, cultural grievances data. Polling consistently shows that a core segment of the voter base feels that traditional social structures are threatened by LGBTQ. And what is tradition? Do we have to go there? In the 1950s, if you're openly gay, you could have been physically attacked, you know. And also, um, in mainstream medicine, uh, homosexuality was considered a disease. How many people know that? You know, you can't openly say that you're a lesbian or a gay. Think about that. And like in there's gay, sheep. There's other, creatures in the animal kingdom that exhibit homosexual behavior. What the fuck, So it's something that's rather more natural than you would like to believe when you look at the biological spectrum of things, you know. Um, okay, so immigration focus. For many voters, opposition to immigration is the primary issue that drives their political participation, overriding other concerns like economic policies. Again, I think it's because of something bigoted. And why? Something racial. Why? Because I've demonstrated already that the Democrats, like Obama and Biden, they got rid of more illegal um, immigration here than the Trump administration. And so it's like this just on the surface, like, well, they're taking our jobs, but underneath that, there's something else going on, and that's a gut feeling that I have, and that's what I'm doing this for. Racial and social resentment matrices, matrices. Okay, matrices. Okay, metrics. Okay, racial and social resentment metrics. Political scientists use specific survey questions to measure racial resentment and cultural anxiety. These metrics routinely show a strong statistical link to support for populist leaders. And these people are the fucking haters. You know who was a great populist leader? Adolf Hitler. Okay, let's move on. All right, so while cultural bias and it goes into like it goes back into hyper partisanship. We already know that institutional distrust. We don't know that, so it kind of like repeats those two things. But it did say at the end of that, public opinion research confirms that social prejudice and hostility towards specific groups are significant motivators for a portion of the electorate operating alongside other political and institutional dynamics. Basically, yeah, I was right. Fucking bigots put him in the White House again. Okay, that's what this is saying in so many words. And I was on a roll. I said, yeah, and don't forget these fucking people who support Trump. They use their amygdalas more than the people who are progressive. So, put that all together. Oblige me there. The theory about the amygdala, the part of the brain that processes fear and threats, is a real area of study in political psychology. Scientists have found biological differences in how conservative and progressive brains respond to the world. Right? Huh? Huh? The Brain and Politics. That sounds like a great name for a book, doesn't it? The Brain and Politics. Politics and the Brain. I'd switch it around. Politics and the Brain. I like that better. Politics and the Brain. Okay. The amygdala. Studies show that people with conservative views often have a more active or larger amygdala. And okay, I'm gonna stop this right there. There are times when I would ask ChatGPT, are these people's brains big, amygdalas larger? And it would say, oh no, but they're used more often. Well, then they're going to get bigger. And so, yes, that's why you really have to vet this stuff out. But you already saw, watching my video from the beginning to this point, how the argument shifted towards what I was saying. Not because I'm making it say what I want, but I just keep grilling this thing. Uh, and so I'm just pushing it and pushing this thing. Okay. Amygdala, the people, okay, already read that. Larger amygdalas. So their brains are highly sensitive to threats, danger, and change. They don't want to change. Hey, they're conservatives. Okay. On the other hand, progressives often have more activity in the anterior cingulate cortex, ACC. This part of the brain handles uncertainty, complexity, and changing environments. Think about that. Putting it all together, we have, okay, this is like, it's a clear picture emerging of why like Trump supporters are completely loyal to him to this day. The threat response, because a conservative brain is wired to focus on threats, messages about invasions at the border, or threats to traditional family structures triggers a powerful survival response. So to the brain, this whole thing about immigration and a gay person approaching you, is the same. It's like it's the same brain, that's part of the brain that's being triggered. Oh, or like a black woman wants to be president. That same thing is being triggered. Think about that. Don't you think that's huge? I do. Okay, I mentioned something about economics. I try to steer away from that. So let's listen. Protection over economics. Let's see what it says about that. When people feel their safety, culture, or way of life is under attack, their brains prioritize protection. Daily economic struggles or policy flaws become less important than electing a leader who promises to fight those perceived threats. And so that's what it is. It's protection over economics. Oh, okay. I must have read that wrong. So it's protection over economics. And so it finally said what I was suspecting all along. It's not just economics. This says it right here, protection over economics. When people feel their safety, culture, or way of life is under attack, their brains prioritize protection. Daily economic struggles or policy flaws become less important than electing a leader who promises to fight those perceived threats. And that's the fucking problem right there. You should be concerned about the economic struggles and stuff. And so here's the thing. And so this is like the double standard that's coming across here. It's like, so yeah, prices are higher. And I've heard Trump support. I gotta find these quotes. Like you have like people interviewing these Trump supporters. Like, even though like prices are higher, I still vote for Trump. Even though it's not America first because we're putting all this money towards Israel and fighting Iran, I'd still vote for Trump. And Trump even said it. He's like, deal with it. You're going to pay $1 of extra for gas, but deal with it. He's saying it. And he says other things, he hates it when the economy is doing good. It's like, and you start voting for this guy because of what I am trying to demonstrate in this video. Us versus them mentality. A highly active amygdala reinforces, here's the amygdala, reinforces a strong divide between the in-group, people like them, and the out-group, immigrants, LGBTQ individuals, LGBTQ plus individuals, or political opponents. This creates an intense emotional loyalty that facts or economic data cannot easily change. And remember, I've read the Bible and stuff, and it says don't fellowship with the unbelievers. Do not fellowship with them. You think about that. So if you're a real hardcore Christian, you couldn't even talk to me because I'm not a believer right now. Like I'm not like you are, you know. And like the problem, and the problem, which I would like to point out is like even within their own group, there's like how many different denominations of Christianity, and like you have like Christians witnessing against other Christians, witnessing to other Christians. I say witnessing against other Christians because they just don't get along. They're all supposedly under the umbrella of Christianity. And that's one thing about religion. What religion does, it divides you. Even within each religion, like I talked about the Sunni and the Shiites, you know, they're both Muslims. You both worship Allah, and you both think that Muhammad's, you know, better than, you know, bread, you know, cream cheese, you know. Muhammad's the shit, you know. You know, when you mention his name, you have to say be upon him, you know. Both Sunnis and Shiites are like that, but they can't get along. And I know Henry Kissinger like that, you know. It's like you got to use real politics against, you know, these people in the Middle East against each other. I mean, and Israel's all like, you know, yes, you know. So religion's a great tool to use against people. You know, it really is. So we have us versus them. Okay. And so this creates an intense emotional loyalty that facts or economic data cannot easily change. Political scientists and neuroscientists agree that for a specific segment of voters, support is not about dollars and cents. It is driven by deeply rooted emotional and biological responses to identity, culture, and fear. And I don't know, I think I proved my point, right? But I kind of you know, chased this dog as it passed by. The Trump supporters still support Donald Trump, even though, you know, he destroyed our economy because of some deep rooted anti LGBTQ thing and other, you know, bigoted tendencies. The link between social prejudice and political loyalty is a major area of study for political scientists, pollsters, and psychologists. Research shows that for many voters, cultural values and identity matter far more than economic data. Which is, I'll go back to Hillary Clinton. Remember when, like, watch the debate between her and Trump. And first of all, it's a white woman, but it's still a woman. Okay, it's a woman, and she was like a good student. You know, like I did all of my homework, and she even they even put up a website, a fact checking website, showing how much Trump lies, like by the minute or something. Every day he's lying, and she was like spouting like these facts. And Kamala Harris was the same thing. She warned us of the kind of shit that we're gonna get if we vote for this guy. And both are women. You know, one is darker skin, so that's two against her. And no, who cares? I don't want this woman in the White House. She's a woman. Get behind me. You know, that's how these people really are. And you can read it in your Bible. All right, you can read it in your. The woman must be remain silent in the church. You know, there's so many Christians that cannot stand female pastors. You know, cultural identity over economics, value-based voting. Many voters prioritize social issues such as immigration, gender roles, and traditional family structures above their own financial well-being. And I would say that even on the flip side, like, you know, you'll vote for a Democrat because of your identity. Like, I'm gay, so I'm going to vote for this guy. And although I'm 100% for that, and I'm in the line with you voting for, you know, that. So you gotta admit, you gotta, because I'm a strange bird. You're a narcissist, like me. We're all narcissists, and so it's like it's about me. You know, yeah, I will go there. You know, you know. Anyways, so value based voting. So it's about social issues. Now, the problem that I have with that is like it should be about class. And even Democrats are guilty of this. But not as bad because they talk like they talk about you know more accessible healthcare and better education and all that to give you a fighting chance to succeed and all that you know so but what am I saying? So, but still, like they don't really emphasize class enough. The one who did, and he did not even get to be nominated for the Democratic candidate was Bernie Sanders. He brought up the whole, like he mentioned class. You don't hear a lot of these other mainstream Democrats, saying class warfare. So if you're running for office and you're pushing out the class warfare card, the class issue, you're not going to get it. You're not going to get very far. So, and I'm aware of that, even though I voted Democrat. And so that's the problem with value-based voting. It's just bullshit. It's so much in the end. It's just so much bullshit. They're using like your vanity. You have social media and your vanity. Like, oh, I socially identify as this or that. It's like get beyond that. Get beyond that. All right. And you might be able to see through this darkness a little better. Uh, and they'll see that above they'll consider that gender roles and traditional family structure above their own financial well-being. Okay, the out group. Okay, the political campaigns often use rhetoric that targets specific groups like the LGBTQ plus individuals or immigrants, creating a powerful us versus them mindset. The amygdala is okay. Loyalty through threat. When voters feel their cultural identity or status is under attack, they become deeply loyal to a leader who promises to protect them, regardless of that leader's economic performance. I mean, Donald Trump, man, he has the Midas touch of turning everything into shit. He thinks he's turning everything into gold. It's just really, so much shit. And they still vote for him because of what I'm demonstrating here. And then, okay, let's look at again, putting together all this stuff to end this part. Biological and psychological triggers. Fear response. As seen in neuroscience studies, a highly active amygdala makes a person more sensitive to perceived threats. Rejecting contrary facts. This emotional state activates strong defense mechanisms, leading voters to dismiss negative economic data, blame problems on political opponents, or rely entirely on supportive media bubbles. So, while some voters support Trump for purely economic reasons, data confirms that a core part of his base is driven by a deep desire to resist changing social norms, making their political loyalty highly resistant to, economic criticism. So that's basically what I was saying. Okay, so I think that I exhausted that thread. Um, and so now I'm going to read my article. We're up 58 minutes into this. It's tight enough. So the article is not super duper long. So I'm going to read that and conclude this. Vinny Mendi Divisi Vici. I look, I lied, I divided, I conquered. Linking bigotry to the MAGA base and how racial grievances is still being used to swindle and to confuse and to divide and conquer. I spelled swindle with the four first letters in uppercase for a little effect. That's the title of my little article here. With the beginning of Nazism in Germany in 1919, 1920, racial hatred was needed to get that ball rolling. You need hard times to gather momentum, but a scapegoat for the sacrifice of history is an absolute necessity to see it through. Nationalist Germany saw the non-Europeans as the threat and anti-Semitism as the final solution. In the US, the Nazi weed had quickly taken seed and was violently pushing up the soil of resentment towards Jews. Henry Ford included in his newsletter conspiracy theories of a Jewish takeover of the world. In 1939, 20,000 Americans gathered in Madison Square Garden, New York, to celebrate the rise of Nazism. Although workers' sentiment was an ingredient in its infancy, minus the hate towards a specific group of people, and Nazism would have died out before erupting into a global catastrophe. The key word is hate, and the people harnessing its energy were no less than wizards when you get down to it. Sharp minds with spellbound orations, uniforms decked with superior graphic design and architecture to amplify its magic, mesmerized and manipulated an uninformed population. It wasn't until September 1, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, that anti-Semitism mattered. Joseph Goebbels, on April 1, 1933, led the boycott of Jewish businesses to punish Jews under the auspices of anti-German propaganda. And in New York, 1901, employees at R. Ho and Company threw paper, water, wood, and iron out their windows at a funeral procession for New York's chief rabbi, Jacob Joseph. Around the world, acts of hatred towards Jews was nothing new. The Inquisition comes to mind. The Nixon tapes reveal the same hatred for both Jews and now blacks. To think he was alone would underestimate the power in numbers and the Southern Manifesto. The 1956 Manifesto was a cry for keeping blacks out of white schools. The majority vote backed by Democrats, as in the 1950s, the two parties, they hadn't traded their hats. When All in the Family began syndication in 1971, the unintended Trojan horse lesson of how to avoid disclosure of your true feelings towards Jews and blacks came to light, especially with the blacks here. Just avoid the buzzwords spewing out of Archie's mouth. Hate minus taboo got you votes. You need not throw the baby out with the water and still appeal to the silent majority. Just don't blow your covert Nazism wad. Deep-seated resentments still lingered then as they do now. Traditions die hard, but what was post-mortem was really an effect of Lazarus. All that's needed is the call to come forth and claim what is yours. To play the victim. Christianity is all about crying persecution still to this day, where there, classically speaking, there wasn't any. But this is not an attempt to lump the meek into one pile of capriciousness. The red letter Christians have made it clear that they were not affiliated with the MAGA cult. And there are others. But I am not writing about them. I am writing about the force that gave Donald Trump, Elon Musk, J.D. Vance their leverage. And yes, religion has something to do with it. Law and order can be heard all over the speeches, from the Southern candidates to Nixon, all the way to Donald Trump. The black versus white kind of order, the black and white laws. The universe be damned. God says there are only two genders. It's not that I necessarily advocate killing the bastards. An all-out verbal slashing is long overdue, I am certain as much. America has a dark, backwoods, Mississippi-drenched past. Even the Democrats were swine. At least 17 states implemented formal Jim Crow laws. Nationwide racial discrimination was present in both law and practice, even outside the South. The irony is, Jimmy Carter was a devout Christian. As he was being ushered out the door of the White House with a Reagan victory, said outcome was, like it still is, fueled by that festering stench America just can't seem to rid herself of. You know, the smell surrounding so many MAGA paraphernalia wielding peeps who still back their turd in chief, even if he's a 34 felony convicted pedo rapist who is dismantling the Constitution, started a war with Iran, approval of ICE murdering more than one innocent American citizen, whose name appears in the Epstein files 38,000 plus times. Here is a repeating example of why these types support Trump. Now, these are in quotes. These are actual Trump supporters saying this. He is not politically correct. He is anti-abortion. He is anti-immigration. He will preserve our culture. Preservation of culture is considered good in most cases. What's wrong with preserving the good parts of American culture? These statements were prior to a second Trump presidency. Now? Okay, now. Donald Trump is better than sliced bread. I think he's almost the second coming, in my humble opinion. This is Troy Niels. Okay. That's representative. He's a representative, by the way. Okay, but I can't seem to find, now this is me again, but I can't seem to find a slurry of Trump enthusiasm these days. So I asked ChatGPT, why do people still support the shitbag? And the very top of the list reason is border control. This is what I'm talking about. Just replace Jews with LGBTQ plus and immigrants and stuff like that, and you got your Nazi scapegoat. Here is, replacing Jews with the immigrants. But I also add today's return of the Red Scare. Trump's neo-McCarthyism is now waged against the whole Democratic Party, to include any American Democratic voter. So, more quotes. We have two enemies. We have the outside enemy, and then we have the enemy from within. And the enemy from within, in my opinion, is more dangerous than China, Russia, and all these countries. But the thing that's tougher to handle are these lunatics that we have inside, like Adam Schiff. I think the bigger problem are the people from within. We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics, and it should be very easily handled, if necessary, by National Guard, or if really necessary, by the military, because they can't let that happen. Another quote. They are a radical left movement. That's kind of like, doesn't sound right, but that's the quote that I got. They are a radical left movement. Okay. Let me reread that. They are a radical left movement that is trying to destroy our heritage, our culture, our economy. Look at what is happening to our country. Our borders are open. Our cities are riddled with crime, and inflation is running rampant. They are so bad, and they're destroying our country. We cannot let them continue with this path of absolute destruction, because if they win, we won't have a country left. Another quote. The radical left knows that the American public does not support their agenda. Normal. What's normal? Okay, what's normal, right? You see how that's laced with this type of bigotry. Normal, hardworking people do not want high taxes, and they don't want a ruined energy sector. So how do they stay in office? They fight against voter ID laws and demand mail-in ballots without verification, as if you really cared. Their policies are so bad that cheating is the only way they can get elected. So that's what that means is they thought that the election was stolen. They still and Trump still believes that it is the only way they can maintain their grip on power. Okay, I think this might be the last quote. Uh, the folks running the opposition today aren't your old school Democrats. They have been completely taken over by the fringe elements. They want the old school Democrats, the ones that, the Southern Manifesto people, right? See how this is? This is the quote. I'm going to reread it. The folks running the opposition today aren't your old school Democrats. They have been completely taken over by the fringe elements. They want to tear down our statutes, rewrite our history, and police your speech. They are the godless communists and radical left jihadists. They are nothing, they care nothing for the traditions of America, and their ultimate goal is a complete Marxist takeover of the system. Well, and there you have it. And so that concludes this video, and thank you.